Hey, I'm Gus, and here's how I make these rad faceted mugs. The central feature of this design is the contrast between the flat, angular facets on the bottom half of the mug compared to the perfectly round and circular top. And recently, I found that I can push this contrast a bit further by adding a concentric swirl to the top. To achieve these circles, I make a relatively fast pull up the cup while the wheel is spinning relatively slowly. I love throwing lines in pottery because they speak about how soft and pliable clay is when it's in the working stage, and I like how this floppy fragility is sort of fossilized when the mugs are fired and come out of the kiln as hard as rocks. When I'm throwing these shapes, it's crucial that I get the correct distribution of clay, especially in the bottom section of the pot. If this area is too thin, I may accidentally slice all the way through when I'm cutting the facets. On the other hand, I prefer these mugs to be on the thinner, lighter side, so I'm always looking for that sweet spot. And inevitably, I end up ruining one or two of these every time I make a batch. I also want the finished mug to have a relatively even weight distribution from top to bottom. So while I'm leaving more clay than usual in the bottom section, I make sure the top is quite thin so that hopefully it'll match the bottom once the facets are added. I use a very thin wire tool to cut the facets into the mug. I think that larger, wider facets have a more dramatic look and feel, but the obvious trade-off is that smaller, skinnier facets are much less likely to slice through the pot. Variations in the force that I'm applying as I'm making the cut also produce these subtle horizontal lines from the wire itself. I threw the bottoms of these mugs quite thin, so in the trimming stage, I was more focused on getting the bottoms smooth and burnished than I was on actually removing any clay. My favorite way to do the transition between the bottom of the mug and the facets is to make a foot that is slightly smaller than the diameter of the mug. I think that this hides the foot a bit, and it gives the entire piece a sort of levitated floating quality when you look at it from above and you can't see the foot. I find that using the flat side of a wooden tool, along with a couple passes of my finger, helps to get the bottoms really smooth. I'll do some additional passes on the bottom with my polishing pads after these mugs get glaze fired. I like to pull nice, thin, flat, wide handles for these mugs. And in this case, I pulled all the handles and I let them firm up for a little bit before I actually attached them to the mugs. I put this small teal cup inside the top of the mug to prevent the rim from getting deformed while I'm attaching the handle. When I'm attaching these handles, I use a lot of slip and I let it gush out when I push the handle into the mug. I don't mess with it at that point, I just let it dry. After it's firmed up a bit, I come back and either compress this clay back into that crack, or I'll just scrape it away. Where the bottom portion of the handle meets the mug, I've gotten into the habit of coming back later and adding a small coil of clay to make this attachment a little bit more robust. Right now, I'm into these subtle, thin thumb rests. I think they give these mugs a really sophisticated finish. This batch of 20 or so mugs is ready to be bisque fired, and I plan to make another shorter video about how they're glazed and reduction fired in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next one.